By the end of this video, you will be able to explain how putting together torn pieces of a newspaper is analogous to the puzzle of the continents, and you'll be able to identify who Alfred Wegener was and describe what continental drift and Pangaea are.
All right, hello there. So you're probably wondering why we're here reading the newspaper. Actually, we're not reading the newspaper, even though geology is often in the news, but we're here to demonstrate a very important concept in geology that we can use a piece of newspaper. So everybody here has a single piece of newspaper, and what I'd like you to do is to just rip it up into about 15 or so random pieces. It doesn't have to be any order, any shape, any size. And as you make those pieces, just make a pile and paper clip them together with your paper clip that I left for you. And if it's not exactly 15, that's fine too. The purpose is to tear up that piece of newspaper into 10 to 15 or so random pieces, randomly shaped pieces like this. And now we're going to pass them around to another person at the table, and they're going to put this piece of paper back together again. So pass it around, or if you're going to go that way, okay. All right, so let's see who can get theirs back together first. All right, so how did we do?
Not too long.
Yeah, it was good.
You got yours all together. I got mine all together. I struggled a little bit, but I got it together. And you're still having?
I'm having a little bit of a hard time.
A little bit of a hard time. So what were some of the things that you used in order to put these, or made in your attempt to put these back together? What was something that you used?
I used the pictures and the colors in the pictures because mine was mostly pictures, so I tried to use that.
So the colors in the pictures. What's one thing that you used?
Well, I was trying to use the words, but really the pictures helped the most.
Pictures help the most, but the words?
The words are definitely helpful too.
Words are definitely helpful, like the headlines and the actual article words. And what's one thing that you may have used?
The most I use using the words in the title here in this Sports Wednesday, and actually the page number too helped me.
Mm-hmm. Page number, okay.
Page number words.
Okay. Anything else that you may have used?
What did you use?
What did I use? Well, I used the way I had this really long straight edge that somebody tore out, and I also had it on the other side as well, this really long piece. So the borders of the piece of paper were helpful to me. So we have the color of the pictures, we have the words, the headlines and the article words, we have the shapes of the pictures, we have the edges. So a number of different pieces of evidence that we could use in order to put these back together again. So what does this kind of remind you of? Taking a piece of newspaper, ripping it up, and putting the pieces back together. What does this kind of remind you of doing? Maybe you did one when you were a younger child.
It's kind of like a puzzle.
Kind of like a puzzle. Would you agree with that?
A very difficult puzzle.
A very difficult puzzle together. Yeah, putting together pieces of a puzzle. Well, the torn pieces of a newspaper is very much like the puzzle. And actually, this analogy of torn pieces of a newspaper is the exact analogy that somebody very important, a German scientist named Alfred Wegener, used. He was the person who came up with the hypothesis that the Earth's continents or land masses at one point were all connected together, and since that time they were connected, they have drifted apart. And he called his hypothesis continental drift. Now there were things that he knew about, pieces of evidence that he knew about, fossils on neighboring continents or continents that are separated by now an ocean, rock sequences, exactly the same on several continents, evidence of ancient glacial deposits in India and in Australia and South America and Africa. and mountain belts that looked like they were literally somebody took a saw or an axe and just sliced them in half, and part of the mountain belt ended up in Europe or Africa, and the other part ended up in North America. And so this idea of drifting continents, oceans opening and closing, he called continental drift, and he also gave a name to that supercontinent when all the land masses were together millions of years ago. Perhaps you've heard of it, its name. Jeff, have you heard of that name?
I heard of it. I believe it's called Pangea.
Pangea, excellent. Yes, it's exactly a perfect name because Pangea means all land. A perfect name for a supercontinent when all the land masses were together. So torn pieces of the newspaper was exactly the analogy that Alfred Wegener used to simulate this idea of continents being ripped apart, coming back together, and trying to put the pieces of the continents back together again by using evidence of fossils and rocks and mountains, very much like we used words and pictures and edges and things like that to put together this puzzle of the continents. So the next time you look at a newspaper, pick up a newspaper, think about the puzzle of the continents and plate tectonics. Wegener didn't call it plate tectonics, but it's certainly the central theory of geology and pretty much governs everything that geology is all about.
When you have finished watching the video, you'll be taking a short questionnaire that will ask you to rate your confidence on a scale from 0 to 10 in performing all of the learning objectives, where 0 is not confident or sure you can do any of the objectives, 5 is fairly confident or sure you can do some of the objectives, and 10 is very confident or sure you can do all of the objectives.